The mist hung heavy, a shroud over the forgotten. It clung to the overgrown roses, the weathered statues, the rusted gate that creaked like a whispered warning. The garden slept, lost in a dream of a brighter past. This place, once vibrant with life and laughter, now lay still. A forgotten memory, waiting to be awakened. Then, the first rays of dawn pierced through the gloom. Golden light sliced through the fog, illuminating the droplets that clung to spiderwebs. Like diamonds scattered on a forgotten crown, they glittered with an ethereal beauty. A symphony of birdsong began, hesitant at first, then swelling with the rising sun. The garden stirred, a gentle breeze whispered through the trees, rustling leaves like hushed whispers. It caressed the petals of forgotten flowers, coaxing them back to life. The forgotten sanctuary was awakening, ready to share its secrets with those who dared to listen. Every stone held a story, every flower a memory. The garden was a tapestry woven with threads of time, each thread a life lived, a love lost, a dream whispered to the wind. And beneath it all, the earth held its secrets close, waiting for the day they would be unearthed. This was no ordinary garden. It was a place where the veil between worlds thinned, where echoes of the past lingered in the rustling leaves and the murmuring stream. Here, time itself seemed to move differently, slowed by the weight of forgotten dreams. The air thrummed with unseen energy, a palpable hum that vibrated beneath the surface. It whispered of ancient magic, of a power that slumbered just out of sight, a power that awaited the touch of the chosen, the ones who could hear the whispers of the forgotten garden.
The rusted gate creaked open, a discordant note in the symphony of birdsong. Lucy stepped through, her niece Daisy trailing behind. The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten blooms. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, painting dappled patterns on the overgrown path. "It's like stepping into a fairy tale," Lucy whispered, her gaze sweeping over the scene before her. Vines, thick as her arms, snaked around crumbling statues, their once proud features softened by time and decay. A stone fountain, dry and cracked, stood sentinel in the center of a forgotten courtyard.
Daisy, ever the adventurer, darted ahead, her laughter echoing in the stillness. She twirled, her bright red coat a splash of color against the muted greens and browns. "Aunt Lucy, look, a wishing well." She pointed to a moss-covered well, its bucket long gone.
Lucy smiled, her heart lifting at her niece's infectious enthusiasm. This forgotten place, with its air of melancholy and mystery, held a strange allure. It was as if the garden itself was calling to her, beckoning her to uncover its secrets.
A figure emerged from the shadows of a towering oak, his silhouette framed against the sun-dappled path. He moved with the slow grace of someone intimately acquainted with the passage of time. His face, etched with the lines of a life lived, held a quiet wisdom. "Welcome," he rasped, his voice surprisingly strong despite his frail appearance. "You must be Miss Lucy."
Lucy started, surprised to be expected. "Yes," she replied, her gaze drawn to the old man's kind eyes. "And this is my niece, Daisy."
The old man smiled, his eyes crinkling at the corners. "A pleasure, Miss Daisy. I am Mr. Thomas, caretaker of this humble garden." He gestured around him, his gnarled hand encompassing the overgrown beauty. "It's not much to look at now, but it holds a certain magic, wouldn't you say?"
"I'll find them. Come on, Aunt Lucy, let's explore." S3, fairies, perhaps. But you'll have to look closely, little one. They're shy creatures, easily startled. S2, it's beautiful. It's like a jungle. Are there fairies living here, Mr. Thomas?
"All right, Daisy, let's see what we can find."
Daisy, never one to stand on ceremony, skipped forward, her gaze wide with wonder. Lucy hesitated, a pang of unease tugging at her. The garden, with its overgrown paths and hidden corners, seemed to hold an air of unpredictable wildness. But Daisy's laughter, echoing through the trees, reassured her. This place, for all its melancholy, held no malice.
Don't worry, Miss Lucy. The garden protects its own. Rest a moment. Let the garden work its magic on you.
This is surprisingly sturdy.
Lucy sank onto the bench, surprised by its unexpected sturdiness. The air around her seemed to hum with a subtle energy, a faint vibration that resonated deep within her. It was as if the garden itself was breathing, its life force pulsing around her. She closed her eyes, inhaling the scent of damp earth and blooming jasmine. The sounds of the city, the traffic and the sirens seemed to fade away, replaced by the gentle symphony of the garden. The rustling leaves, the chirping birds, the soft trickle of water from a hidden spring, all combined to create a sense of serenity she hadn't realized she'd been missing.
Isabel, do you remember?
The late afternoon sun cast long shadows through the shattered panes of the old greenhouse. Dust motes danced in the golden light, swirling around Mr. Thomas as he stood in the doorway. His gaze, distant and filled with a deep sadness, swept over the scene before him. The greenhouse, once a haven of life and growth, now stood decaying, a testament to time's relentless march. Vines, thick as his arm, snaked through broken glass and crumbling brickwork. The air hung heavy with the scent of damp earth and decaying wood, a poignant reminder of a beauty long faded. The name Isabel, spoken to the stillness, seemed to hang in the air, a palpable presence in the decaying beauty of the greenhouse. It was as if the very walls themselves remembered her, whispered her name on the wind.
And then she was there.
A fleeting image, a whisper of a memory. Young and vibrant, her laughter echoing through the silence like a melody from a distant past. Isabel. Her hair, the colour of spun gold, cascaded down her back as she moved through the greenhouse, tending to her beloved plants. Her touch, light as a butterfly's wing, coaxed life from even the most delicate blooms.
These lilies are exquisite, Thomas.
Isabel said, her voice filled with delight. She gently touched a pristine white bloom, its fragrance filling the air around them.
They remind me of our wedding day.
He said, plucking a delicate blue flower and tucking it behind her ear. S4, and these forget-me-nots.
They remind me of your eyes, so full of life, so full of love.
Isabel laughed, a sound that echoed with the joyous abandon of a heart overflowing with happiness. She leaned into him, her head resting against his chest. The air around them thrummed with their love, a tangible force that filled every corner of the greenhouse. She whispered, her voice barely audible above the gentle hum of bees buzzing among the flowers. S4, promise me, Thomas.
Promise me this garden will always be our sanctuary, a place where our love will live on, even when we are gone.
Young Mr. Thomas held her close, his heart overflowing with love for this woman who had captured his soul.
I promise, my love.
He said, his voice thick with emotion.
As long as this garden lives, so will our love. Entwined like the vines that climb these walls, our love will endure, forever bound to this sacred place.
Mr. Thomas stood in the decaying greenhouse, the echoes of laughter and whispered promises swirling around him. The air, thick with the weight of memories, pressed down on him, threatening to suffocate him with the sheer magnitude of his loss. He closed his eyes, his face etched with pain. The garden remembered. Every brick, every pane of glass held the memory of Isabel close, a bittersweet reminder of a love that time could never truly erase. S3. And yet there was comfort in that remembrance, a sense that even in death their love had not entirely faded. It lingered still, a faint echo in the rustling leaves, the scent of jasmine on the breeze, the enduring strength of the vines that clung tenaciously to the crumbling walls. The garden remembered, and in its remembrance Mr. Thomas found a sliver of solace, a flicker of hope amidst the ruins of his broken heart. S3.
A squirrel, Aunt Lucy, did you see him?
I did, she whispered, her gaze following Daisy's. He's very quick, isn't he?
Chittering sound.
He wants us to follow him, Daisy whispered, her voice hushed with awe. He wants to show us something.
Should we? Lucy asked, a note of hesitation in her voice.
Come on, Aunt Lucy, it'll be an adventure.
Daisy, she called, her voice tight with sudden apprehension. I think we should head back. It looks like a storm's coming.
Just a little further, Aunt Lucy. I think Scruffy's found something.
The air hung heavy, thick with the scent of damp earth and forgotten things. A single shaft of light, piercing through a crack in the ceiling, illuminated the dust motes dancing in the stillness. I stood in the center of the chamber, my breath catching in my throat. It was as if I had stepped into the heart of a forgotten dream. The chamber, hidden beneath the tangled roots of an ancient oak, was small and circular, its walls lined with shelves piled high with books, maps, and strange, unidentifiable objects. The air thrummed with a subtle energy, a palpable hum that vibrated deep within my bones. A shiver ran down my spine, a mixture of fear and exhilaration. This place, hidden from the world for who knew how long, held an air of secrets, of stories whispered in hushed tones, and memories carefully preserved from the ravages of time. Her gaze fell upon a small wooden chest nestled amongst a pile of leather-bound journals. Its surface, worn smooth with time, was inlaid with mother-of-pearl, the iridescent sheen catching the light. Drawn by an unseen force, I reached out and gently lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, lay a silver locket. Its surface, tarnished with age, was engraved with a single delicate flower, a forget-me-not. As I lifted the locket, holding it delicately between my fingers, I felt a jolt, a sudden surge of energy that seemed to flow from the cold metal into my hand. Images flashed through my mind, vivid and fleeting. A sunlit greenhouse, a young woman with hair like spun gold, a love so intense it seemed to radiate from the very air around them. Then just as quickly they were gone, leaving behind a lingering sense of bittersweet joy and a heart-wrenching ache of loss. Isabel, she whispered, the name escaping her lips before she could stop it. It was as if the locket itself had spoken, had whispered its secret into her soul.
You saw it too, he said, his voice barely a whisper.
I looked up at Mr. Thomas, my eyes wide with astonishment. He stood just inside the entrance to the chamber, his frail frame illuminated by the flickering light of the lantern he held. His face, etched with the lines of a life lived, was pale, his eyes filled with a mixture of awe and fear. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. The locket, a tangible link to the past, had unlocked something within me, had awakened a connection to a love story I had never lived, but somehow felt deep within my bones. This locket, she said, her voice regaining its strength, it belonged to her, didn't it? To Isabel.
Mr. Thomas nodded slowly, his gaze never leaving the locket in Lucy's hand. It was her most prized possession, he said, his voice thick with emotion. A symbol of our love, she called it. He stepped further into the chamber, his shadow falling across the floor like a shroud. This chamber, he continued, his voice echoing slightly in the silence, it was Isabel's sanctuary. A place where she could escape the world and lose herself in her dreams. She believed that this garden, this place, held a special magic, that it was a conduit between worlds, a place where love could transcend even death.
The first rays of dawn pierced through the darkness, a promise of new beginnings after the storm's fury. The air, washed clean by the rain, held the sweet fragrance of renewal, of life surging forth with irrepressible strength.
Lucy emerged from the hidden chamber, her steps lighter than they had been in years. The garden, battered but not broken, greeted the dawn with a defiant burst of colour.
Flowers, their petals heavy with raindrops, lifted their heads towards the sky, their vibrant hues a testament to the enduring power of life. The storm, in its destructive dance, had cleared away the debris, revealing a beauty that was both fragile and fierce.
Daisy, her eyes wide with wonder, ran towards Lucy, her laughter echoing through the stillness. She held a single, perfect rose in her hand, its petals a delicate shade of pink, kissed with dew. Aunt Lucy, look! The garden is awake!
Mr. Thomas, his face etched with exhaustion but his eyes shining with a newfound peace, smiled down at his young companion. "Yes, Miss Daisy," he said, his voice rough but filled with a quiet joy. "The garden has weathered the storm, and so have we." He turned to Lucy, his gaze meeting hers with a depth of understanding that transcended words. "You were right, Miss Lucy," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "This garden, it holds a powerful magic, a magic that binds us together across time and loss." He gestured towards the blossoming rose in Daisy's hand. "Isabel would have loved this," he whispered, his gaze distant, lost in the memories held within the garden's embrace. "She always said that roses symbolized love's enduring power, its ability to bloom even in the face of adversity."
Lucy watched as Mr. Thomas, his steps lighter than she had ever seen them, made his way towards the greenhouse, his beloved garden calling him back to its embrace.
And in that moment, she understood. The garden was more than just a place of beauty, more than just a sanctuary from the world. It was a living testament to the enduring power of love, of hope, of the unbreakable bonds that connect us all.
It was a place where memories bloomed anew, where whispers of the past mingled with the promise of the future, and where even the deepest wounds could begin to heal. As Lucy and Daisy followed Mr. Thomas towards the greenhouse, the sun breaking through the clouds in a blaze of golden light, they heard it. A faint whisper carried on the breeze, a whisper that seemed to emanate from the very heart of the garden itself.